Welcome to Jeevashastram. In my previous video, I talked about the basic structural and functional unit of life. And what is that? That is cells. Today, I am going to talk about how cells are discovered. So first of all, when you see a dog or a rose or a snail, what do you see? You can tell that they are very different on the outside. But on the inside, they are all made up of same building blocks. Each and every living being in the earth is made of cells. The smallest living things have only a single cell, but in case of a complex organism like human, we have trillions of cells in our body. So cells are living things simplest building block. It means it is the basic structural and physiological unit. You can see here mice, chicken, rabbit, dog, human, chimpanzee, elephant, whale, they all look different from outside, but they have a basic structural and physiological unit. And what is that? That is cells. So now the cell is discovered and named by Robert Hooke, a British scientist. But the discovery of cells would not have been possible without the advancement in microscopes because you can't see the cell by your naked eye. So, first of all, we have to know how microscope originated and helped in the progression of science. The earliest microscope were designed by two Dutch spectacle makers, Hans Janssen and Jacques Janssen. They were father and son. They discovered the microscope around 1590. They have created the first compound microscope. You can see here the picture of Jacques Janssen and his microscope. This is the first compound microscope. It is developed by Father Sandu. In 1667, the author of Micrographia, Robert Hooke, significantly improved the basic design of earlier microscopes. Though he did not make his own microscopes, he was just heavily involved with the overall design and optical characteristics of the microscope. The microscopes were actually made by Christopher Cork, a instrument maker based in London. But overall, this microscope fell short in optical performance. You can see the microscope here. This is the eyepiece of microscope. This is barrel. This is the focusing screw, and this is objective. And this is specimen holder. You can place your specimen here. This is water flask, and this is oil lamp. Dutch scientist Antony van Leeuwenhoek made further improvements. Today, he is known as the father of microscopy. His microscopes are the best of his era in terms of magnification. At that time, he achieved magnification power up to 270 times, larger than the actual size of the sample. And he used just a single lens in his microscope. What he did, he took scraping from tooth and looked it under microscope, and he saw some bacteria. Similarly, he took some pond water and looked under the microscope, and he saw some protozoans. So he was the first person to observe bacteria and protozoa. Then he presented his findings to the Royal Society in London, where Robert Hooke was also making remarkable discovery with microscope from observation of plant cork tissue. Here you can see the drawing from Hooke, what he observed in the cork tissue of plant. After the observation of plant cork tissue, Robert Hooke concluded that the tissue are made up of repeated units, and he called these units cells. So Antony Leeuwenhoek discovered the bacteria. He earned his title of the father of microscope, but interestingly, it took until 1839, nearly 200 years later, before cells were finally acknowledged as the basic units of life. So he played a vital role in the development of cell theory. After that, in 1838, a German botanist, Matthias Schleiden, proposed that every structural element of plants, he was researching on plants, so he proposed that plants is composed of cells or the product of cells. So he proposed that every structural element of plants is composed of cells or the product of cells. He also believed in the idea that cells arise by a crystallization like process either within other cells or from outside. And in 1839, his fellow German physician Theodor Schwann proposed that in animals, he was researching on animals. So he proposed that in animals too, Every structural element is composed of cells or cell products. His theory was more groundbreaking because at the time the understanding of animal structure far lagged behind that of plants. And he also proposed that the fundamental laws of cells were identical between plants and animals. Then what happened? In the same year, they both were having dinner together and they are discussing their work on plant and animal tissue. After the discussion, they came to the conclusion that the structural elements of plants and animals are essentially the same, and they formulated their conclusion as the cell theory. So, what is cell theory? According to cell theory, cells are the basic structural and physiological units of all living organisms, and cells are both distinct entities and building blocks of more complex organisms. So they proposed the cell theory, but they did not understand the origin of cells. They thought cells emerged by the self assembly of non living materials, means that life arises from non life by spontaneous generation, like mice from dirty cloths, maggots from dead meat, insects from mixture of straw and pond water. And the debate over whether or not life could arise from non-life continued until 1859, when the French Academy of Sciences sponsored a contest for the best experiment to prove or disprove spontaneous generation. And you know who won the prize? The prize was won by the great French scientist Louis Pasteur. He proved that life must be present in order for life to be generated. So Pasteur's understanding of microorganisms led him to propose the germ theory of disease and explain the role of single-celled organisms in the fermentation of beer and wine. He also designed a method of preserving milk by heating it to kill microorganisms. It's the process known as pasteurization. Whenever you go to a dairy shop, when you bring a packet of milk, you can see the word pasteurization written on the milk packet. That is the name of Louis Pasteur. He invented this process to kill the microorganisms. Today, we accept the fact that all cells come from pre-existing cells. We also understand that the functional properties of organisms derive from the properties of their cells. We further also understand that cells share a common ancestry that goes back billions of years. So there is some update to the classical cell theory, and the new cell theory is called modern cell theory. What it says? It says all cells comes from pre-existing cells. All cells are similar in chemical composition. Most of the chemical reactions of life occur in the cell. Complete sets of genetic information are replicated and passed on during cell division. These are the four postulates of modern cell theory. So today that is for all. Next day I am going to discuss about the fundamental unit of life. Yeah, before that, one thing, when the Sladen and Swan are building the foundation of the cell theory, that time at the same time, the Charles Darwin was beginning to understand how organisms undergo evolution again. That is a very important thing in biology. So I will talk about the fundamental unit of life in my next video.